Welcome to Complete Curiosity. I'm Ralph Benker, and alongside my co-host, Dr. Alan Watkins, we're excited to delve into the world of organizational well-being. In this episode, we explore the crucial elements of fostering a culture of wellness within businesses, from the significance of skilled facilitators to the 4 pillars of successful well-being programs. We provide insights and practical strategies to enhance both individual and organizational flourishing. Tune in as we uncover the keys to holistic wellness. Let's dive in. Hi, Alan. We're talking about well-being today.
Ooh, exciting. One of my favorite topics. I know I always say this one's my favorite topic, but this one really is my favorite topic, It's something I've thought a lot about, so let's go for it.
Well, let's see what you make of this, because there have been a spate of news headlines over the last few weeks, mainly from a piece of research that was done by the Wellbeing Research Centre at the University of Oxford. And essentially what they have ascertained is that, if I'm somewhat provocative, well-being doesn't work. It doesn't move the dial. In fact, they go as far as saying it might actually be negative and taking people backwards in terms of their well-being. And here's the kicker. Obviously we have launched our well-being app, and they're specifically calling out well-being apps don't work. And so I thought we could unpack some of this today, because there are some big challenges and possibly some misunderstanding. And I'm sure there are many people out there that are engaging in well-being activities in their companies that are wondering, well, what should they do? Should they just pack it up and forget well-being, or is there a better way?
So of course, baby and bathwater comes to mind. Do you want to share any details about what specifically? Because, it's a very blanket claim, before I unpack a few sort of counterpoints on my thoughts about such narratives. So do you want to go into a bit more detail, Ralph, and then we can dig in, or shall I just wade in?
No, so I think actually, looking at the headlines and the way the news is reporting it is probably somewhat unhelpful, whereas going through some of the source papers that actually have set out the methodology is a little bit more helpful. And really what they've ascertained from their research is that individual well-being interventions don't really work. And so essentially, if you are, giving people a well-being app where they can go and practice some meditation, or you're giving them some sleep coaching, or potentially even doing one-on-one coaching, you're giving them some resilience training, that doesn't work. And what they're advocating for really is systemic change. So actually, maybe what we would describe as more traditional change management, so operational change, better pay, better working conditions. So really some of the nuts and bolts stuff that we're all experiencing in the workplace.
Well, I think what's really helpful about, a sensationalistic headline, it's very interesting. On one level, it's kind of irritating, because it completely, glosses over the real debate, in some attention-grabbing sensationalism. But on the upside of a sensationalist headline is it draws attention, and you have to look into, well, what's really the story here? So in that regard, it's quite useful, I think, such a sensationalistic headline. So let's dig in and try and provide a bit of guidance. Of course, well-being is a word worn smooth by a million tongues. It's and it covers a multitude of things. So let's just deconstruct it. What we've got here is people advocating that the system change, or the business. What does the business need to do? Pay its people better. Actually manage change better. All of those things. And of course, the answer to that is, of course, it does. But that's what you and I would know the it dimension of change. So that doesn't exclude the I and the we dimension of change, which we'll dig into. But we'd be advocates of actually all sustainable solutions, as I pointed out in the Wicked and Wise book, require you to have an I, a we, and an it dimension. So if you just pay people more, that is not going to increase well-being. In fact, there's pretty good evidence that just increasing pay doesn't make you feel better beyond a sort of basic level of, I've got enough to cover my expenses. So the risk is that let's imagine we stop all well-being and well-being apps and all meditation, all mindfulness and all of that, and we just pay people more and have better change management. That's making the exact same mistake which they're pointing to, but just in a different direction. So when you look at I, we, and it, our view would be you need to improve I, you need to improve we, you need to improve it. And you shouldn't collapse any one of those three dimensions. So they're saying, the I piece doesn't work. What you really need is the it piece. So forget I, just do it. But that's about as sensible as forgetting it and just doing I. So it's basically the same mistake, but just in a different direction. And again, you want I, we, and it. So of course, one should look at pay and, financial well-being. Of course, you should look at organizational systems and is there excessive bureaucracy, and are there structural issues, are we running an impossible matrix where I've got, I'm double or triple hatting with hard line and dotted lines to 5 different bosses and I don't really know which way to turn. Of course, we should look at all those it-related operational type things. And of course, if we improve the efficiency and the effectiveness and the design of the organization, that could definitely have a well-being consequence. But that doesn't mean to say that we should can all I interventions. So let's lean into those I interventions. Now, as you know, Ralph, some years ago, I did a talk to the Institute of Psychiatry on the topic of relaxation can kill you. That put the cat amongst the pigeons. So the point really being is you can have bad meditation, you can have bad mindfulness, you can have bad relaxation. The devil's in the detail is you have to really understand in the I domain in terms of what are we doing for well-being, what stuff works, and we'll come back to the definition of works, what stuff works and what stuff doesn't. So if you go on, I've done this, first time I've learnt to meditate. I went on a course over the weekend and I did this meditate. If your teacher is sort of, incompetent and doesn't teach you very well, and they get you practicing that meditation, but it's very poorly guided, of course it's either not going to work or even potentially be counterproductive. So any of these I interventions really the quality and the effectiveness of them are dependent on the quality and the effectiveness and the sophistication of the teacher. So if we unpack that a little bit, for example, most people when they do meditation, they just close their eyes, count the breath, and many people fall asleep. Well, that's not going to help much, right? So if you have slightly better training in meditation, what they'll actually teach you is it's not so much closing your eyes, although in the beginning you might do that. But again, as we've discussed before, if you look at all the statues of the Buddha doesn't have his eyes firmly closed. He lowers the eyelids, i.e. he's slightly disconnecting from the distraction of the stuff around him to concentrate his mind on specific states of being. So if you're going to meditate, what you really should be doing is rehearsing or practicing being in a certain state or being on a certain planet in the universe of emotions. So compassion meditation, what you're really doing is slightly disconnecting from the outside world and focusing on compassion. Now, you can do that clumsily or you can do that with some skill if you're well guided. So that would be a much more effective form of meditation than just close your eyes, count your breath, fall asleep. So if you've got the former, not the latter, then the meditation might start to help you. But if you've got bad meditation, it's neutral or counterproductive. And the same with relaxation techniques. The reason I gave the lecture on relaxation will kill you, because sometimes you can be relaxed but still in a negative state. That's essentially what boredom is, what indifference is, what disengagement is, what helpless is, what hopeless is. Your level of arousal, you're relatively relaxed, but you're still pumping out massive amounts of cortisol. So that's why it can kill you. And it's particularly bad for you because you may mistakenly believe you're okay because you're relaxed. It's sort of like what my kids might call the whatever state, whatevs, dad, whatever. So if you're in that sort of I don't care state, you're pumping out lots of cortisol. You're not aroused. You're actually quite relaxed. You just don't care. That is bad for your health. So in that regard, it's pernicious. You think you're okay because you're relaxed, but actually you're pumping out cortisol. It's bad for your health. So relaxation can kill you. Now, relaxation can be very beneficial if you're relaxed and positive, but if you're relaxed and negative, it can kill you. And again, there's plenty of data on patients who are getting treated for cancer, and when they finally give up, they die. They're very relaxed, but they die. And there's also some interesting data on long-term meditators, because some long-term meditators who have not been well trained die prematurely. And it's because they think they've transcended, which would be in the universe of emotions bottom left, so relaxed and positive, but they haven't actually transcended, they've just unplugged. In the universe of emotion, that's bottom right. It's not the same thing. So I would agree that many forms of meditation might have no effect or be counterproductive. Many forms of relaxation may have no effect or be counterproductive. Many forms of mindfulness, many forms of, the sort of personal practice might be neutral or counterproductive. So in that regard, you have to have a good teacher. And then when we get to the bit about does it work? Now, as you know, in my former life when I was a medical doctor, I spent many years doing what's called phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials. So testing whether anything works, whether it's a meditation practice or a new health technology or a new drug for intensive care. We would set up a clinical trial, often in a double-blind randomized placebo-controlled trial to see whether it works. So when you do that, of course, what you discover is the metrics, like by what yardstick are you measuring it working? Is it an improvement in a subjective experience? Is it an improvement in an objective piece of data? So you then have to get into what are we actually measuring? And then you're into all sorts of research niceties like sample size and all those types of things. So actually in the I, the we, and the it, there are plenty of it interventions which themselves are well intended but are counterproductive. I remember working for a company once where they put a gym in, because they thought, well, for the well-being of our people, we'll put a gym. Having a gym at work, that's surely going to improve our well-being data. And they ran that for a couple of years, and then what they discovered is the data got worse. And as they investigated that, what they found out is that, say, let's, for simplicity, say 100 people in that office, 10 people were going to the gym every lunchtime, 90 people were so busy they didn't have time to go to the gym. But what they saw is they saw 10 people in Lycra outfits walking past their desk every day going to the gym. So not only were they not going to the gym, but they witnessed other people going to the gym, which then added to their burden because then they felt doubly guilty that they weren't going to the gym. So people put the gym in place, but the well-being data got worse. So there can be it interventions that are making the data worse, just as there can be I interventions that are making the data worse. And then, of course, we interventions, which these papers don't mention, which is a large part of well-being, is our relationship with the people that we work with and the people around us. So we have to look at that. So it's not just about better pay and improved, processes and decision-making processes and change management in the it. It's about effective mindfulness, meditation, yoga, reflection, any of those things, and also better relationships. So our view is you have to enhance I, we, and it, and then you also need high-quality measures of I, we, and it to actually construct a well-being program. And then, as you know, because you and I have built the Wellbeing app, it is super complicated. So in the app, if you just have an app that is a meditation app, well, again, if the meditation is poor quality and poorly structured, it might be nicely packaged with glossy pictures and images. But if the guidance isn't great, well, of course, that Wellbeing app is not going to improve the data, could make it worse. So the same rules apply when you go into an app. You've got to have a really well thought through program that is really provides a multitude of interventions in the I, we, and it to really move the dial. So I welcome these sort of sensationalist headlines because it, at least, the very least, should provoke people into thinking a little bit more seriously about, well-being programs and whether they're really moving the dial. I mean, it's been a bugbear of mine that I've seen organizations set up EAP schemes, or counseling in resilience, or stress management programs, or promotion of healthy lifestyle, putting jugs of water around the office, bowls of fruit. And largely these things are pointless because they're not well thought through. They're not good metrics surrounding them. They don't really go to the heart of the issue. They don't really help the individual to develop real skills that move the dial. And I'm all for real skills that move the dial.
So that all sounds really compelling when you say it in that way, Alan. And I'm just wondering, as a leader, considering, how I'm going to improve the fate of my organization. All leaders are trying to grow the business, make the business more profitable, make it a better culture, better for customers, hopefully deliver, even greater value to the environment and to humanity as a whole, if they have the time to think at that level. So typically we have the right intent, but, given the option to put a gym in or actually, engage in some coaching or to get the latest Wellbeing app, as a leader, how can I actually start to evaluate, what I should be expecting out of it? Because I think, one of the criticisms is that the management consultancies are posting some very significant benefits to well-being. They're positing some big numbers in the reduction of, absenteeism, the reduction of presenteeism, and ultimately increase in performance. And the fact that these well-being initiatives, for every £1 spent on well-being, you get £4 back. And so as a leader, you're kind of like, well, there must be hard benefits, and of course I want to see the return on investment. But is it actually realistic to, evaluate well-being in the context of return on investment? Can I really identify hard dollars that I'm going to get back as a result of my investment in well-being?
I think it is realistic, and I think you can get hard dollars, but only if you've got good programs. Put in a poor quality, poorly structured, poorly designed, poorly executed, tick box exercise, which sadly is the norm in most organizations. I mean, as you know, Ralph, I've spoken to many organizations over the years trying to get them to put in a much higher quality program, and they go, oh yeah, but it sounds all a bit complicated, Alan. And what they really want to do is somebody wants to tick the box to show that they've done something, rather than actually solve the problem. Now, if you're in the camp of tick the box to show that they've done something, so nobody can be accused of doing nothing, or the organization can't be found out or criticized for doing nothing, they've ticked the box. It's because they don't really care about moving the dial. And oftentimes it's like a first aider. They've got minimal training, right? And they can't really help, and so EAP schemes and counselors, I mean, it sounds like a nice thing, but, I would really encourage people, do not put anything in place unless you're really sure it can actually give you an ROI. So then you're on to your question, which is, well, how do you evaluate whether the program is going to help? So I'm going to offer you 4 S's. So when you're evaluating whether will this program move the dial, will this program actually give us an ROI? Now, the first S is, what is the skill or aptitude, the capability of the people, doing the well-being training? So, and in that regard, like, how much do they know? Have they got a degree in, medicine or physiology or biomechanics if they're a yoga teacher or whatever? What is their skill set? What training have they got? Or have they just had a 10-minute instruction and been told you're the well-being champion now? So you've got to look at the sophistication of the skill set of the person doing the training. How good are they? So that's your first S. The second S is, and have they done this before? And if they have, on what scale? So scale is the second S. So somebody who's done a bit of well-being work in a factory, but then is suddenly dropped into an office to run a program for the office. Now, they might be pretty good in the factory, but they can't transfer or generalize their skills from the factory to the office. So they fail to do this at scale, or they've done it with, kids in school, but they can't do it with adults. Or they've done it for people in the finance department because they're finance themselves, but when they go to, the sales department, they get rejected the salespeople, because they can't do it in different parts of the business, or they can't do it in different regions of the world, or they can't do it for different age groups, or I'm very good, so I can operate when I'm doing one-on-one guidance on well-being, but when I'm in front of a room of 2,000 people, I crumble under the pressure of public speaking. So the scale piece is, how many different types of scale plays can this trainer or this person who's teaching, whether it's meditation, mindfulness, or reflection, or personal development, or any of these things, can they do it to one? Can they do it to many? Can they do it to 5-year-olds? Can they do it to 90-year-olds? Can they do it in the UK? Can they do it in Costa Rica? Can they do it in China? Can they do it in, the fintech sector? Can they do it in retail? Can they do it in a charity? Can they do it in government? That's all scale. So that's the second S. So when you're evaluating it, have they got the knowledge and the skill set to teach the things that need to be taught? That's the first S. The second S is, have they played at scale? So that's the second way that you're going to evaluate. Now, the third one is sort of social and emotional intelligence. Like, have they got the relationship capability themselves, or is it all theory? So do they have what you and I would know as aboutism? Do they know all about well-being, but, they're themselves, 10 stone overweight, heavy smokers, sweating profusely while they're doing the they're not the picture of health. They don't practice what they preach, and they, worse still, in terms of their social intelligence, they don't regulate their own emotions very well. So somebody criticizes something that they're saying and they suddenly become incendiary. Now, clearly they don't have the social and emotional intelligence. Or a more subtle thing is they're running a class on well-being and they don't read the room. So they've started to talk too much theory rather than flipping into, right, guys, let's practice some stuff now. They've not noticed. And so the sort of classic example of somebody who's literally reading the script, at the sort of pedestal that they're stood in front of, giving a lecture on well-being, and they don't even make eye contact with the audience. So that's a lack of social intelligence. So, good trainers or people who are there as coaches or guides or companions or well-being champions, they need social intelligence, social and emotional intelligence. So that's the third S. And of course, if they haven't got much social emotional intelligence, you probably oughtn't to employ them in this capacity because they won't deliver the ROI. And perhaps the fourth and most powerful S is sophistication. So what is the level of maturity and sophistication of the individual doing the coaching, guiding, mentoring? How sophisticated are they? And I don't mean, how much knowledge they've got or the skill set, but how mature are they as a human being? Are they, do they come across as a sort of self-referential, egocentric teenager? Or do they radiate warmth and wisdom and compassion and humanity? So that's the fourth S. So, what's a good program look like? You need somebody who's incredibly sophisticated and mature and wise, somebody who's incredibly knowledgeable about the topic and can integrate multiple different disciplines, and not just go with a single modality. The entire wellbeing program's about mindfulness. Well, that's just one piece of a multitude of pieces that you might want or not want, and how culturally appropriate is it? So we've been in various parts of the world. You can't even mention the word meditation. So it's no good trying to foist meditation upon people who don't want to practice meditation for whatever reason. So you've got to have the skills to be able to bring in any of the bits that are required, and you've got to be able to do it at scale with lots of different types of people, and you've got to have the humility and compassion and social emotional skills to be able to deliver it. So that's the four things that people should be evaluating when they're trying to choose who is going to really move the dial for us and deliver an ROI. Now, if you haven't got that, sort of sorted out, if you're not evaluating your provider in that way, well, not surprisingly, you get research like this recent one going, mental health or well-being programs don't work. Well, of course they don't work. If you've got a bad provider who teaches the stuff badly, of course they don't work. They're counterproductive. You're actually losing or wasting money and time. And even worse, because you think they're a good thing, people get disappointed that they don't deliver, and then they get cynical, and then cynicism is bad for you. So use the 4 S's to evaluate the provider and put a proper program in place with a really high quality provider, and actually wrap up some really precise and high quality metrics around that, and you will see a very different outcome.
So here's a question for you. Do you think that somebody or a team could improve their well-being just by picking up an app?
Yes, they absolutely could. But again, same issue, right? What's the quality of that app? How well has it been designed? How many skill sets have been looked at? What's the integration of the different bits of the app? So if the app is just a meditation app, well, that might work for a few people for a short period of time. But the research on the meditation-only apps is, only the sort of early adopters who are really religious and who probably don't really need the app because they're probably going to meditate anyway, are going to get benefit. So for the well-being apps to work, which was why one of the guiding principles in the app that you and I designed, is there's got to be a multitude of options because people learn in a different way, they practice in a different way. So we've seen on our app that some people like the meditations, that's why they might go on the app. Other people like the biofeedback. They want to see their own data live and continuously. So they might use our app for that. Other people like the universe of emotions, to be able to expand their literacy from the 12 emotions they started with up to the over 2,000 emotions on our app. Other people prefer some of the skills training. Other people prefer the guided missions that we've got where they can learn a little bit new every day. So all of that's embedded in the app because people are subtle and complex and nuanced and they need different things. Whereas if you've got a single modality, that's like saying, everybody's going to benefit from, eating, more bread. Well, the gluten intolerant won't benefit from eating more bread. So you need a range of options. And most apps are unimodal, whereas actually, the complete app offers a more complete package because having spent, as you know, 110,000 hours studying all of this, Ralph, that's what's required. It's complicated and it's not a one-size-fits-all.
So if you get it right, let's just imagine you've really gone for it and you've implemented a multimodal approach and you've integrated aspects of personal I development, we relating, the culture's great, and you've got an absolute rock star list of it stuff that you're trying to accomplish. What are the kind of things that you would expect to actually change in an organization? How would you start to see the benefits?
Well, I think you start to, the whole principle here is to empower the individual, is to put the power back in the hands of the individual. So I think the responsibility of the organization is to be much, much more careful with who they choose as their supplier to help them on the well-being issue. Stop just ticking the box. I mean, put suppliers to the sword across using those 4 S's. Can they do it across those 4 S's? So that's the responsibility of the organization, is to provide a good provider, a good program, a good solution. The responsibility of the individual is to use the tools and practice the tools to transform their life. The only person that can transform their life is themselves. So our individual responsibility is to practice the tools that are given to us. The organizational responsibility is to give us the tools from a good provider. Because what we're effectively at the core of it trying to do is to get people out of victimhood and into ownership. Now, sadly, a lot of people wander around thinking their well-being is down to somebody else. Well, the government needs to provide, or my company needs to pay me more money, or somebody needs to do something either for me or to me in order for me to be well. So I'm a victim. And if that person doesn't do that thing, if my boss isn't nice to me, I'm going to suffer mental health problems. Or if my business doesn't, give me that raise, then my health is going to suffer. So that's the victim position. I am at the mercy of my boss, of the industry, of the government, of society at large, of my colleagues at work. And little old me, I can't do anything about any of this because I've got no power, no influence to make myself better, to be well. Well, actually, I think we matter more than we think. We can move the dial. But if we're stuck in that victimhood mindset, it's virtually impossible. So at the core of all these things is we've got to get people out of that victim mindset, or what is often called the fixed mindset, and into the growth mindset, or into the ownership. So I like to talk about going from a victim to an owner. So let's take a simple example. If I think my frustration, by the way, the commonest emotion in business by a country mile is frustration. If I think my frustration is down to you, Ralph, and I would say that, Ralph, you really frustrated me yesterday. You did that to me, i.e. the cause of my frustration is you. Well, then it's a very quick step to go, well, if you frustrated me, it's up to you, Ralph, to make me feel better. So I basically blame you. I point the finger at you and say, you frustrated me. So that's the victim position. I believe you are the cause of my frustration. But that's not really true, because you didn't inject me with chemicals. You didn't force me to take tablets that created the biology of frustration. The biology of frustration, the pounding heart rate, the clenched fists, the clenched jaws, the sort of erratic energy, that wasn't due to something you injected me with. All of those biological dimensions to frustration were created by me, not by you. I mean, you might have behaved badly, but who created the chemistry of frustration in my body? Well, that will be me. I am the actual architect of that frustration. Now, that frustration may have happened in response to something you did, but the person who created the frustration was me. So that simple insight, if I created it, I can uncreate it. Bingo. That's the breakthrough insight. If I sit here and believe that you created it, I naturally assume it's up to you to do something about it. And of course you don't. So I just stay frustrated. So if we take what we call radical ownership for how we feel, stop blaming other people for how we feel, own it. I created the frustration, And if I create it, I can uncreate it. So I like to say, look, we are all the architects of our own emotion. Nobody is doing anything to us. We are doing this to ourselves. That's a very different mindset. If we're doing it to ourselves, the frustration and the happiness, we create all of it ourselves in response to what's going on around us. So it's a much more empowered position. So as you teach people these things, the level of empowerment, once this penny drops, the level of empowerment and engagement goes right up. Because I realize that I'm the architect here. Now, Matthew Ricard, who's the Dalai Lama's right-hand man, who I know quite well, said it really beautifully in relation to the emotion of happiness. I just want to read you what he said. He said, happiness is a result of inner maturity. It depends on us and us alone. It requires patient work carried out from day to day. Happiness must be built, and this requires time and effort. In the long run, happiness and unhappiness are therefore a way of being. Let me just repeat that. In the long run, happiness and unhappiness are therefore a way of being. So that's ownership. I own whether I'm happy or unhappy. Now, most people go through the world not owning that, blaming somebody else. And then you get almost sort of performance activism around their own misery. They wear it as a badge of honor because they're so struggling with this. I've seen many people almost play, misery top trumps. I'll see your misery and I'll up you frustration. Like this is a good thing. And all that really is we just haven't taught people how to change how they feel. We haven't taught people how to be well. I mean, it's kind of ironic. The clue is in the title, well-being, not well-doing. So it is at the core an I issue. It starts in the I. We've got to be well. Now, in order to be well, we've got to regulate who we are and how we are as a human being, not a human doing, a human being. That is within our remit. We can change these things. So unhappiness or anxiety or suffering is ultimately a choice. We can learn to heal these things. We can get beyond these things. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. It requires, as Matthew says, patient work carried out from day to day, all of that. But you can transform your own life. And that's the primary switch that we need to make, is to help people go from victims to owners.
Yeah, that really resonates with me massively. And I think what's incredible, about that is how you relate to others and the people around you. And let's be, honest, we spend probably most of our time interacting with people at work than we do in any other mode in our lives. And so it really game changes the way we can start relating to others. And I think that's probably one of the things that I have seen as being such a clear and significant impact and, dare I say, benefit to this kind of vertical development that you've just described. And of course, we are brilliant at being human doings. And maybe, as you say, this is really about cultivating the excellence of being. And it's what we're called after all, but we seem to be quite stuck, Alan. So I think, you've set that out, and maybe the thing here is the quality of our experience, must change the quality of what we do and the decisions we make. It's the two go hand in hand. Is that something that you would support?
Oh, well, absolutely. And by the way, who you travel with. You're a fantastic person to spend some time with, Ralph. I love spending time with you and chatting to you. It always uplifts my spirit. So the quality of the relationships is really key. Now, that's down to both of us, right? It's down to both of us to improve the quality of our relationship and work on that over time. There's loads we can do. I was talking to somebody this week about trust, something that's often talked about in business and massively misunderstood. And, nobody's really properly, well, what is it? Oh, we want more trust. Okay, let's talk about, how much trust you have got and how you'd get more of it. And I did this sort of thought experiment. I said, look, just go around the room with the 10 people in this room and write down confidentially a number in relation to everybody. What's the level of trust that you have with person A, person B, person C, person D on a 0 to 10 scale? Now, if it was a 2 out of 10, right, what can you do to make that a 5 out of 10? If it was a 7 out of 10, what can you do to make that a 9 out of 10? And of course, what happens is most people just expect it to be there or to get better over time without thinking about, well, how do I increase the level of trust? And can I do anything? They tend to mistakenly think you either trust somebody or you don't. Well, that's not really true. There are reasons why you might trust somebody. And once you understand those reasons and how trust is kind of constructed, you can increase the level of trust with somebody proactively, just like you can get out of frustration proactively. There are many, many things that we can do to improve the quality of our life. So if you have people around you that are high quality people, you're going to be well. We are essentially social animals, whereas if you have a lot of very toxic people around you, then it's harder to be well. I mean, you're still the architect of your own experience, right? But it's much easier to be well amongst really happy, content, and wonderful people. It's contagious, right? But you can, and when you're really skillful, you can still be well, even in a fairly toxic culture, because you regulate you. But of course, it's easier. It's a bit easier. It's like, if the sun's shining, it's easier to smile than if it's, raining cats and dogs. So I'm a big believer that, there's lots that we can do, very simple things to improve the quality of our life. We can make a difference to ourselves, and who we travel with, who are our companions, really matters. And even if we're traveling with an average set of companions, we can still increase the level of strength of our relationships with those companions. We can develop ourselves and encourage those others to develop. And as we develop ourselves and the others develop themselves, the quality and depth of the relationship becomes greater over time. So I'm hugely optimistic about how much we can move the dial for ourselves, and therefore for those that might be traveling with us. As you and I might mature, we become a better companion for others. So there's tons and tons of things we can do. So I'm a big optimistic advocate of, we can move the dial.
I find the quality of the wine also helps.
Yes. Well, yes. That's also a quick shortcut until you have too much. And then, interestingly, alcohol is a little aside. It's basically a depressant. It's a stimulant initially, but if you have a bit too much, you get maudlin, sentimental, and, actually it'll put you to sleep. So like many of these things, but I was chatting on the point of wine. As you know, one of my mates is Heston Blumenthal. I was in one of his restaurants once, and he did this very interesting thing where he said, drink this glass of wine. And he wrote the word wine in big, fluffy cloud letters. And I drank a sip of wine whilst looking at the word wine that he'd written in a big, fluffy cloud, nice letters. And then he said, okay, put the glass down. I'm going to write the word again. And he wrote it in very jaggedy, sharp letters. And actually, the wine tasted differently when I was looking at jaggedy, sharp letters than when I was looking at fluffy cloud. And the point he was making is, we eat with our eyes as well as our smell and our taste. It's a multi-sensory experience. So wine, the quality of wine and the benefit of wine is dependent on many factors. So if you're in good social company, the meal tastes better, the wine tastes better. The benefit of wine, like any of these things, is not just in the wine itself, it's in how you feel about the wine. So if I say, oh, Ralph, here's a glass of wine, this is an unbelievably expensive, this is the £1,000 bottle of wine. I've been saving it for 30 years for just this evening, Ralph, and I want to celebrate with you, right? The truth is, it's a bottle of Liebfraumilch from the petrol station down the corner, but I'm selling it to you. Actually, you have a different experience of that wine. Or if we're drinking wine when we're in a really upbeat, positive state. So how we feel about the wine, if we feel this is a really beautiful piece of wine and Alan's made a special occasion, it's not so much the wine itself, it's all the contextual factors that really, determine the biological impact. I'll give you another example. So moving away from wine to the Black Forest Gâteau. Now, the biological impact of a Black Forest Gâteau is pretty negligible. But the feeling of guilt that you broke your diet and you had the extra slice of the back has a much bigger biologically negative impact. And the same with a salad. The biological impact of a salad, virtually negligible. But the feeling of virtuosity, do you know, Ralph, I had a salad yesterday. Oh my God. I'm not one for a salad, but and I feel virtuous, and that virtuosity will increase my DHA, and the biological benefit could go for a week. So whether we drink wine or go to the gym or have a chocolate cake, a large part of the health and well-being benefits is not so much the fact of what we did, a meditation, a yoga, a mindfulness class. It's to do with how we feel about what we did. And that, of course, is partly determined by who we did it with. So you have to take all those things into consideration. So I'd say that to people who are obsessed by eating salads and guilted by eating chocolate cake. A little bit of what you fancy is not too bad so long as you don't do it to excess. If you're going to have the chocolate cake or that glass of wine, don't make it undermine the experience with the guilt that might go with it. So do it in moderation and really enjoy the moment, whether enjoying the salad or enjoying the chocolate cake or enjoying the glass of wine. Be present with it, really enjoy it, and it'll have a much bigger biological health and well-being benefit for you.
So, Alan, we're nearly out of time, but if we had to think of rewriting that sensationalist headline, so well-being actually makes workers feel worse, how would you rewrite it?
Probably something along the lines of well-being, choose carefully. Something like that, because it's ultimately about, I think the biggest thing is choosing somebody who really knows their stuff. Just like anything, Ralph, if you want legal advice, you go to the best lawyer in the city. If you want medical advice, you don't get it from the guy down the pub. You go to the best doctor you can find. And the same is true of well-being and health. Find somebody who's done the work, done the research, who really knows what they're talking about, assess them through the 4 S's, and then partner up with them, and then you will see a massive ROI. All other stuff, tick boxing, superficial, possibly making things worse, or at the very least costing you a lot of money and not changing the data. And that's largely what you see. If you look at the data on health, mental health, well-being, over the last 20 years, the data's been getting worse despite huge money spent and a lot of effort by organizations on this. And it's because they haven't chosen their supplier wisely. They've just rushed it or tick-boxed it because they can't be bothered to evaluate or find out what is it that really moves the dial. So my headline would be, well-being, choose wisely.
Well, I might know a guy that might be able to help. So direct message me if you're looking for somebody. All right, Alan, that's been an awesome discussion. Thanks very much for that. Have a great evening.
You too, Ralph. Always a pleasure.